Most people spend their lives chasing perfection, only to discover that destiny rarely arrives wearing the clothes they expected. Vincent Moretti had built an empire on precision. Every meeting began exactly on time. Every guest was carefully selected. Every detail inside the glass penthouse overlooking Manhattan had been arranged weeks in advance. From the crystal chandeliers reflecting warm golden light across polished marble floors to the private string quartet quietly rehearsing in the corner before the evening's most important arrivals. Nothing was accidental in Vincent's world. Tonight was no exception. Some of the most influential names in business, finance, and philanthropy would soon gather beneath his roof for a private dinner where trust mattered far more than signatures. To avoid unnecessary attention from the media, a world-famous supermodel had been hired through an exclusive agency to appear as Vincent's elegant companion for the evening. She was expected to arrive at precisely 7 o'clock. At exactly 7 o'clock, the private elevator doors opened. Every conversation inside the foyer stopped. The woman who stepped out looked nothing like the celebrity everyone had anticipated. She was a young black woman wearing a neatly pressed housekeeping uniform beneath a light gray coat, carrying a worn canvas tote bag instead of a luxury handbag. A simple employee identification badge still hung from her pocket as though she had rushed straight from work without realizing she was entering one of the most exclusive residences in New York City. Naomi Carter immediately sensed she had walked into the wrong world. She looked around at the towering windows framing the skyline, the grand staircase wrapped in soft amber lighting, and the elegantly dressed staff whose expressions revealed growing confusion. Before anyone could speak, she offered an apologetic smile. "Good evening. Crown Elite Agency asked me to deliver replacement documents for tonight's event. They also told me someone needed temporary assistance until the scheduled guest arrived." Several assistants exchanged uncertain glances. One quietly reached for an earpiece. Seconds later, Vincent Moretti appeared from the private library. Tall, composed, and dressed in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, he carried himself with the effortless confidence of a man who had spent years making impossible decisions without raising his voice. His calm gray eyes rested on Naomi for 3 silent seconds before he finally spoke. "You are not the supermodel I ordered." There was no anger in his voice, only disappointment sharpened by certainty. Naomi lowered her eyes respectfully. "No, sir. I believe there has been a mistake. The agency called me less than an hour ago and said they urgently needed someone to help. I assumed they meant organizing the event." She glanced toward the elevator again and tightened her grip on the canvas bag. "I'm very sorry for the misunderstanding. I will leave immediately, so I do not cause any inconvenience." Without waiting for permission, Naomi turned toward the elevator, embarrassed that she had interrupted an evening so carefully prepared. She had almost reached the call button when Vincent quietly noticed something no one else had. She never asked who he was. She never looked around searching for famous faces. She never tried to explain herself or ask for another opportunity. She only wanted to leave without creating trouble for anyone. It was the exact opposite of what he had come to expect from people invited into his world. Just as the elevator doors began to slide open, Vincent spoke again, his calm voice echoing across the silent penthouse. "Close the door." Every member of the staff froze. Naomi slowly turned around, uncertainty written across her face. Vincent took one measured step forward without breaking eye contact. "She stays." Naomi could not understand why the room had suddenly become so quiet. The staff remained perfectly still, each of them waiting for Vincent Moretti's next instruction, as though even the silence belonged to him. She tightened her grip on the canvas tote bag resting against her side and offered an uncertain smile. "Sir, I truly believe the agency made a mistake. I can leave now, and no one will be inconvenienced." Vincent looked at her without answering immediately. There was something unusual about the way she carried herself. She did not seem intimidated by luxury, nor was she fascinated by it. She simply looked concerned that she had interrupted someone else's evening. 2 hours earlier, Naomi had been finishing the last room on the 22nd floor of a historic hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The housekeeping cart beside her contained neatly folded towels, fresh linens, and cleaning supplies, while the setting sun painted warm orange reflections across the windows facing the Hudson River. It had been a long shift, but she still smiled when an elderly guest thanked her for helping retrieve a family photograph that had slipped beneath a heavy dresser. Small moments like that reminded her why kindness never depended on someone's job title. As she prepared to clock out, her phone vibrated. The caller was Crown Elite Agency, where she occasionally accepted temporary hospitality assignments on weekends for extra income. The coordinator sounded anxious. "Naomi, we need your help immediately. A courier canceled at the last minute, and we have confidential documents that must be delivered to a private event. Once you arrive, they may also ask you to assist with simple hospitality duties for a short time." Naomi glanced at the time. "Will I still be able to leave before 10 o'clock? "Absolutely. We know you have responsibilities at home." She smiled with relief. "Then I can do it." Every additional assignment mattered. Her mother had spent months recovering from surgery, and Naomi balanced housekeeping during the day with temporary evening work whenever possible. She had quietly postponed her own college plans because paying medical bills and keeping their apartment secure mattered far more than chasing personal dreams. She never complained. She simply kept moving forward one day at a time. No one at the agency mentioned Vincent Moretti's name. No one explained that some of the city's most influential guests would be attending. Naomi believed she was delivering paperwork and helping staff organize a formal dinner. Standing inside the magnificent penthouse now, she realized how completely different reality had become. Crystal chandeliers shimmered. Overhead, original artwork decorated the walls. Fresh white orchids lined the grand staircase. Everything reflected a level of elegance she had only seen in magazines while waiting in grocery store checkout lines. Yet the beauty of a room was not what occupied her thoughts. She worried instead about the embarrassment the agency's mistake might cause everyone involved. Vincent quietly observed every reaction. She had not complained. She had not demanded compensation. She had not tried to convince him she belonged there. Most people spent their first minutes around him trying to gain something. Naomi seemed interested only in making sure no one else suffered because of an honest misunderstanding. One of Vincent's senior advisors stepped beside him and spoke softly. "We still have 30 minutes before the first guests arrive. We can call the agency again." Vincent looked toward the elevator, then back at Naomi. For reasons he could not explain, the woman standing before him seemed far more genuine than the carefully manufactured image he had originally arranged for the evening. And for the first time in many years, instinct began to challenge preparation. Edit Vincent Moretti walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline while the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind distant buildings. His advisors immediately followed, lowering their voices as though the city itself might overhear their concerns. "Sir, we still have time to request another companion," one of them said. "The agency can send someone more suitable." Vincent remained silent for several moments. He watched Naomi standing quietly near the elevator, still wearing her housekeeping uniform beneath the light gray coat, carefully holding the document envelope she had originally been asked to deliver. She did not wander around admiring the artwork. She did not take photographs of the breathtaking view. She simply waited patiently for permission to leave. "How long until the first guests arrive?" Vincent finally asked. 27 minutes. Another advisor spoke carefully. The original arrangement existed for a reason. The guests expected a recognizable public figure beside you tonight. It reinforces the image we planned. Vincent slowly nodded without taking his eyes off Naomi. "Image." He repeated the word quietly, almost as though he was testing its meaning. Then he turned toward her. "Miss Carter." Naomi immediately stepped forward. "Yes, sir." "Did the agency explain why they asked you to come here?" She gently shook her head. "No, sir. They only said someone needed help for a formal event. I assumed I would be carrying supplies, organizing seating, or assisting the staff if necessary. You were never told to pretend to be anyone else." "No, sir." Her answer arrived without hesitation. Honest, direct, uncomplicated. Vincent had spent years negotiating with people who carefully measured every sentence before speaking. Naomi answered questions the way someone answered when they had nothing to gain by changing the truth. "What do you do when you're not helping the agency?" Vincent asked. "I work as a housekeeper at the Grand Wellington Hotel during the day. And afterward, I usually go home." She smiled politely. "Sometimes I accept temporary jobs if they fit my schedule." "Why?" Naomi hesitated for the first time. She seemed uncomfortable discussing herself. "My mother is recovering from surgery. I'm helping with the bills until she is back on her feet." There was no attempt to earn sympathy. "No dramatico explanation." She spoke as though responsibility were simply another ordinary part of life. One of Vincent's advisors quietly whispered, "Sir, she has absolutely no experience attending an event like this." Vincent replied without looking away from Naomi. "Perhaps that is exactly what makes her different." Before anyone could respond, the elegant woman who managed every formal event inside the penthouse descended the grand staircase. Victoria Bennett had organized diplomatic receptions, charity galas, and private dinners for nearly 15. Naomi followed Victoria through a quiet hallway illuminated by soft wall sconces that cast a warm glow across polished oak panels and framed black and white photographs of New York City from another era. Every detail inside the penthouse reflected discipline, rather than excess, and even the silence seemed carefully designed. Victoria opened the door to a private dressing suite where a team of attendants waited beside garment racks filled with elegant evening attire. Naomi immediately stopped at the entrance. "I do not think I belong in here," she said gently. Victoria smiled with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years reading people correctly. Neither did many remarkable guests before their first invitation. Naomi looked down at her housekeeping uniform. "I do not know the rules for evenings like this." Victoria walked closer and spoke softly. "Good manners are not memorized. They are practiced every day. Based on what I've already seen, you know far more than you realize." While the attendants carefully selected a simple navy evening dress with graceful lines and understated elegance, Naomi remained hesitant. She insisted that nothing expensive should be damaged because of her. She apologized whenever someone adjusted the hem or offered a different pair of shoes. No one had ever apologized so often for receiving kindness. Downstairs, the first luxury vehicles began arriving beneath the covered entrance. Distinguished guests stepped onto the marble walkway wearing tailored tuxedos and designer gowns, greeting one another with polished smiles that had been perfected over decades of high society gatherings. Conversations floated through the grand foyer about investments, charitable foundations, international travel, and upcoming business ventures. Every introduction carried influence. Every handshake suggested opportunity. Vincent welcomed each guest with his usual composed professionalism, yet his attention drifted repeatedly toward the staircase. His senior advisor quietly leaned closer. "People are already asking who will accompany you this evening." Vincent answered without concern. "They will have their answers soon enough." Moments later, Victoria appeared at the top of the staircase beside Naomi. The room did not fall silent because she looked like a celebrity. It fell silent because she carried herself with quiet dignity that no designer label could manufacture. The navy dress suited her. Naturally, her hair had been styled with elegant simplicity, and the gentle confidence in her eyes remained exactly the same as when she had arrived wearing her housekeeping uniform. She had not become someone different. She simply looked like the truest version of herself. Several guests exchanged puzzled glances. A woman wearing an elaborate diamond necklace whispered to the gentleman beside her, "I have never seen her at any gala." Another guest smiled politely before asking, "Which family is she connected to?" No one seemed to imagine that she had spent the afternoon changing hotel linens and helping strangers feel comfortable. Vincent stepped forward and offered Naomi his arm with effortless courtesy. "You look perfectly prepared," he said. Naomi gave a nervous smile. "I still feel like I might accidentally break something." Vincent almost laughed, although very few people had ever seen that expression from him. "The only thing worth protecting tonight is not made of crystal." As they entered the ballroom together, curious eyes followed every step they took. Some guests measured Naomi with quiet skepticism. Others searched their memories, convinced they should recognize her name. Naomi noticed the attention, but refused to let discomfort change the way she treated people. She smiled warmly at every server who passed with silver trays, thanked each attendant who opened a door, and paused to help an elderly guest retrieve a silk handkerchief that had slipped unnoticed onto the polished marble floor. Vincent observed the small gesture from across the room, and while everyone else continued searching for her social status, he began recognizing something infinitely more difficult to find. The dinner settled into a comfortable rhythm as conversations drifted beneath the soft melodies of the string quartet and the glow of crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Servers moved gracefully between tables carrying carefully prepared courses while New York's skyline shimmered beyond the towering windows like a sea of distant stars. Naomi remained quietly beside Vincent whenever protocol required it, but she never behaved as though she belonged at the center of attention. Instead, her eyes naturally wandered toward the people around her, noticing details that everyone else seemed too busy to see. Across the ballroom, an elderly gentleman named Charles Whitmore, a retired philanthropist admired by nearly everyone in attendance, struggled almost unnoticed as he attempted to stand from his chair. His cane had slipped several feet away after another guest accidentally nudged it beneath the table, and the lively conversations around him continued without interruption. Before any member of the staff could react, Naomi excused herself with a polite smile and walked calmly across the room. She bent down, retrieved the polished wooden cane, and placed it gently into Mr. Whitmore's waiting hand. "Take your time, sir," she said warmly. "There is no hurry." The elderly man smiled with grateful eyes. "Young lady, thank you. Most people see the cane before they see the man holding it." Naomi answered softly, "My mother always says everyone deserves to be noticed before they have to ask." She waited until he found his balance before quietly returning to her place without expecting thanks or recognition. The exchange lasted less than a minute, yet Vincent had watched every second. He realized that while many guests spent the evening searching for influential conversations, Naomi instinctively searched for someone who might need help. There was no performance in her kindness, because she believed no one important was watching. Mr. Whitmore later approached Vincent during the next course and smiled knowingly. "Your guest possesses something remarkably uncommon." Vincent glanced toward Naomi. "And what is that?" The older man rested both hands upon his cane. "She pays attention to people instead of appearances. That quality cannot be purchased, inherited, or taught in any boardroom." Before Vincent could respond, another guest interrupted with a friendly laugh. "Vincent, you continue to surprise us. You always seem to discover remarkable people before anyone else does." Vincent looked across the ballroom again. Naomi was quietly thanking one of the servers after accepting a glass of sparkling water, treating him with the same respect she had shown every guest. The young server appeared almost startled, as though he rarely heard gratitude from those attending events like this. Victoria noticed the moment as well. She stepped beside Vincent and spoke in a low voice. "The staff has been talking about her all evening." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because she remembers every person's name after hearing it only once, thanks everyone who helps her, and somehow makes people feel as though their work matters." Vincent slowly nodded. He had invited countless accomplished individuals into his home over the years, yet very few had ever managed to change the atmosphere of an entire room without delivering a speech or seeking attention. Naomi had done it simply by treating every person with equal dignity. As dessert was about to be served, one of the banquet captains hurried discreetly toward Victoria with quiet concern written across his face. Something unexpected had gone wrong behind the scenes, and if it was not solved within minutes, the flawless evening Vincent had planned for months might begin to unravel. Victoria stepped away from the dining room with the banquet captain, her calm expression hiding the urgency in his voice. A refrigerated dessert display prepared for the final course had failed during transport from the catering kitchen, leaving several signature soufflés collapsed before they ever reached the serving trays. Replacing them on such short notice would be nearly impossible, and serving them as they would immediately become the subject of whispered conversations among guests accustomed to flawless presentations. Several members of the service staff stood silently in the preparation room, uncertain which decision would disappoint Vincent the least. Naomi had followed only because she noticed the worried faces of the employees rushing through the hallway. She remained near the doorway, careful not to interrupt. Victoria said quietly, "We have less than 15 minutes. The replacement desserts are still 20 minutes away." One of the chefs lowered his head. "We have never had this happen before." Naomi looked across the stainless steel work tables where fresh berries, whipped cream, mint leaves, and small chocolate decorations had already been prepared. Years of working in hospitality had taught her that guests rarely remembered perfection as much as they remembered how people responded when plans changed. She spoke gently, almost apologetically. "May I make a suggestion?" Every eye turned toward her. "At the hotel where I work, we occasionally create individual dessert plates when large displays cannot be served. Each plate looks intentional because every guest receives the same careful presentation." The pastry chef hesitated before studying the ingredients already available. His eyes slowly widened. "If we separate the soufflés into individual portions, garnish them with fresh berries and cream, and serve them with the chocolate pieces." Naomi nodded. "No one will think something was replaced. They will simply believe this was always the design." The chef smiled for the first time in several minutes. That would actually work. Without waiting for recognition, Naomi quietly rolled up the sleeves of her gray coat and began arranging berries on a small dessert plates with the same steady hand she used every day preparing welcome amenities for hotel guests. She never attempted to take control. She simply worked beside the staff as though she had always been part of the team. The tension inside the room gradually disappeared. Servers lined up finished plates while the pastry chef supervised the final touches, grateful that a simple idea had rescued weeks of preparation. Victoria watched the entire process in silence. She had organized hundreds of prestigious events, yet she understood exactly what had happened. Naomi had not saved the evening because of extraordinary culinary talent. She had saved it because she stayed calm while everyone else focused on the problem instead of the solution. A few minutes later, the desserts entered the ballroom to genuine admiration. Guests complimented the elegant presentation, praising its refined simplicity and seasonal freshness. No one suspected that the course had been completely redesigned only moments earlier. Vincent noticed the relaxed expressions returning to his staff and quietly asked Victoria what had changed. She answered with a faint smile. "Your unexpected guest reminded everyone that experience is valuable, but composure is priceless." Vincent looked toward Naomi as she thanked one of the servers for allowing her to borrow a tray before slipping quietly back into the background, never mentioning her role in solving the crisis. At that moment, he realized she had accomplished something few people in his world ever managed. She had earned the respect of an entire room without asking anyone to notice her, and somehow that silent victory impressed him far more than any carefully planned performance ever could. As the final conversations of the evening drifted across the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed in ways that no carefully planned schedule could have predicted. The guests still admired the elegant surroundings, the flawless service, and the breathtaking view of Manhattan glowing beneath the night sky. But more than one conversation had quietly shifted toward the young woman no one had expected to see there. Naomi remained unaware of the attention. She thanked the musicians as they finished a performance, returned an empty glass to a passing server with genuine appreciation, and smiled warmly at every employee who crossed her path. To her, every person deserved the same respect regardless of the suit they wore or the job they performed. Vincent noticed that pattern more with each passing minute. Curious about the woman who had transformed the evening without ever seeking recognition, he stepped away from his guests and quietly approached the banquet captain who had worked beside Naomi in the preparation room. "How long have you known Miss Carter?" he asked. The captain smiled. "Personally, only tonight, sir, but several of our staff recognized her from the Grand Wellington Hotel." Vincent listened without interrupting. They all said the same thing. If a new employee feels overwhelmed, she is the first person to help. If an elderly guest needs extra assistance, she somehow notices before anyone else does. She never leaves until everyone finishes their work, even when her own shift has already ended. Vincent remained silent as the captain continued. One of my cousins works housekeeping at the hotel. He once told me Miss Carter gave up a promotion because accepting a management position would have required longer hours, and she wanted to be home every evening to care for her mother during recovery. The words settled heavily in Vincent's thoughts. He had spent years surrounded by people eager to advertise every generous act they performed. Yet Naomi had never mentioned any of this herself. A few moments later, Victoria joined him carrying a folder she had requested from the agency after the earlier misunderstanding. "I thought you might want to see this," she said quietly. Inside was only a brief employment profile. There were no glamorous photographs, no impressive titles, and no long list of achievements. Instead, there were simple references written by former supervisors. Reliable under pressure. Always places guests first. Trusted by every department. Exceptional professionalism. Volunteers whenever additional help is needed. Vincent read every line twice. There was nothing extraordinary about the words individually. Together, they painted the portrait of someone whose character had been built through countless unnoticed decisions made when no reward was expected. He looked across the ballroom and saw Naomi speaking with Mr. Whitmore again. The elderly philanthropist laughed warmly as she listened with genuine interest to stories about his late wife and the community library they had built together decades earlier. She was not trying to impress him. She simply made him feel heard. Mr. Whitmore later caught Vincent's eye and offered a quiet nod that needed no explanation. It was the kind of approval earned through character rather than reputation. Vincent slowly folded the profile and slipped it back into the folder. For the first time in many years, he realized that influence could open doors, wealth could create opportunities, and status could command attention. But none of those things could replace the quiet strength of someone who had chosen kindness every single day without expecting the world to notice. As the last guest prepared to leave, Vincent understood that the greatest discovery of the evening had never been a famous face arriving at his door. It had been the ordinary woman who had unknowingly reminded everyone present what extraordinary character truly looked like. By the time the final guests thanked Vincent for the evening and disappeared into the quiet line of waiting town cars, the penthouse had grown peaceful again. The musicians packed away their instruments, servers carefully cleared the last crystal glasses from the dining tables, and the glittering lights of Manhattan reflected across the windows with a calmness that seemed very different from the tension that had filled the room only a few hours earlier. Naomi quietly slipped back into the hallway where Victoria had first welcomed her. She carefully folded the navy evening dress into the garment bag provided by the attendants and changed back into her familiar housekeeping uniform. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she smiled softly. The elegant dress had been beautiful, but it had never truly felt like her. She thanked every member of the staff individually before picking up her worn canvas tote bag. To Naomi, the evening had simply been an unexpected assignment that had turned out far better than anyone imagined. She hoped the agency would not lose its client because of the misunderstanding. As she stepped into the foyer, Vincent was waiting near the grand staircase. His jacket had been removed, and the formal intensity that had surrounded him throughout the evening had quietly softened. "Leaving already?" he asked. Naomi smiled politely. "My mother worries if I arrive home too late. I promised I would not keep her awake." Vincent nodded with understanding. "Did tonight unfold the way you expected?" She laughed gently for the first time since arriving. "Not even close." The honesty of her answer made him smile. They walked together toward the private elevator at an unhurried pace. Neither of them seemed interested in filling the silence with unnecessary conversation. Finally, Vincent asked the question that had occupied his thoughts all evening. "Why did you stay?" Naomi looked at him with quiet surprise. "Because you asked me." "To." Vincent waited, sensing there was more behind the simple answer. She continued in the same calm voice. "When someone places trust in me, even by accident, I try not to walk away from it. I did not know what tonight would become, but I believe the least I could do was help if I was able. Vincent looked toward the windows overlooking the city. Thousands of lights stretched across the skyline, yet her words somehow carried more weight than every important conversation he had held that evening. Most people would have left the moment they realized they were in the wrong place, he admitted. Naomi smiled thoughtfully. Sometimes the wrong place becomes the place where someone needs you the most. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. Before stepping inside, Naomi turned toward him. Thank you for treating me with respect, even after the mistake. Vincent lowered his eyes for a brief moment. The respect was earned. Naomi shook her head gently. Respect should be given before it is earned. That is the only way people have the chance to become their best selves. The doors slowly closed, and Vincent remained standing in the silent foyer long after the elevator had disappeared. Victoria approached quietly beside him. You look as though you are still thinking. Vincent answered without taking his eyes from the closed elevator doors. I spent years believing the right people entered my life because of careful planning. He paused before speaking again. Tonight, I realized that the most important person in the room was the one no invitation had ever intended to bring. The following morning, sunlight poured through the towering windows of Vincent Moretti's office, replacing the golden glow of chandeliers with the quiet promise of a new day. Manhattan was already alive below, yellow taxis weaving through crowded streets, while thousands of people hurried toward meetings, offices, and opportunities they hoped would change their lives. Vincent stood beside the window, holding a single folder that had remained on his desk long after everyone else had gone home. It was Naomi Carter's employment profile. He had reviewed billion-dollar contracts in less time than. He had spent reading those few pages again and again. Every reference described the same woman he had witnessed the night before. Reliable, thoughtful, calm under pressure, trusted without question. None of those qualities could be manufactured by wealth or reputation. They had been earned one ordinary day at a time. Across the city, Naomi was already back at the Grand Wellington Hotel, tying on her housekeeping apron before beginning another shift. She greeted co-workers with the same warm smile she had shared inside the penthouse, pushed her housekeeping cart through quiet hallways, and carefully prepared guest rooms as though the extraordinary evening before had simply been another pleasant memory. She never mentioned the dinner. She never spoke about Vincent Moretti. To her, there was nothing to boast about because helping people had never been something she considered exceptional. Late that morning, the hotel manager approached with a puzzled expression. Naomi, there is someone here asking for you. She looked toward the lobby and stopped in surprise. Victoria Bennett stood waiting near the front entrance, dressed with the same effortless elegance as always, holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with a simple navy emblem. Several employees exchanged curious glances as Victoria walked over with a friendly smile. Good morning, Miss Carter. Naomi returned the greeting. Is everything all right? Victoria handed her the envelope. Mr. Moretti asked me to deliver this personally. Naomi opened it carefully. Inside was not a check, a gift certificate, or a glamorous invitation to another social event. Instead, it contained a formal offer to join the Moretti Foundation as Director of Guest Relations and Community Hospitality, overseeing charitable events, mentoring hospitality staff, and helping create programs that serve families, senior citizens, and neighborhood organizations across New York City. The salary exceeded anything Naomi had imagined, but what caught her attention most was the final handwritten sentence beneath Vincent's signature. It read, "This opportunity is offered not because of what you wore, but because of who you are." Naomi quietly lowered the letter, her eyes shining with grateful emotion. Please tell Mr. Moretti that I will need one day before giving my answer, she said softly. Victoria smiled knowingly. He expected you would. Before leaving, she added one more message. He also asked me to remind you that the invitation has nothing to do with correcting yesterday's mistake. He believes yesterday happened exactly as it was supposed to. That evening, after discussing everything with her mother over homemade soup at their small apartment kitchen table, Naomi made her decision. She accepted, not because the position came with prestige, but because it allowed her to continue doing what she had always believed mattered most, helping people feel seen, valued, and respected. Weeks later, employees throughout the foundation noticed something remarkable. Meetings became warmer. Volunteers stayed longer. Guests smiled more often. The culture began changing in quiet ways that no policy manual could explain. Vincent occasionally watched those changes from a distance and remembered the woman who had arrived carrying a worn canvas tote bag instead of a designer purse. He had spent years searching for perfection and nearly sent genuine character back down the elevator before recognizing it. From that day forward, he never measured people by the expectations they fulfilled, but by the dignity they carried into every room they entered. In that day, everyone who crossed their path remembered what true dignity looked like.